webinar. We'll be talking about the relationship between website performance, customer experience, and customer satisfaction, a critical relationship for any retailer or brand selling online. Our speakers will be Nikki Baird, a managing partner at Retail Systems Research, a retail consulting and research firm, and Phil Hotchmuth, head of market intelligence at Dyn, a company whose products help companies monitor, control, and optimize their online infrastructure, and the sponsor of today's webinar. After they speak, we'll take your questions. You can ask questions any time using the text box on your screen, and later this week you'll receive an email explaining how you can access today's slides and also a report that Phil will reference. Before Nikki begins, I'd like to present a few statistics and provide some context for today's discussion. We all know that online retail sales are growing much faster than sales in bricks and mortar stores. We can see this from this chart, which we need to advance a slide to get to the next chart, which shows that the relative growth of online sales versus store sales in the United States for the last 8 quarters. This is an internet retail calculation. We take out gasoline sales and restaurant sales. That's why store sales really jumped in the 4th quarter as gas prices went down. But even so, the relationship between online sales clearly growing faster than sales in stores. So you look at this chart and you think e-commerce is doing pretty good, but Amazon is doing much better. The blue bars there represent Amazon's growth over those 8 quarters. Nearly everyone who's selling online is competing with Amazon these days. So you've got to deliver as good an online experience as Amazon does, and that's a pretty high bar. The other important point I wanted to make is that online shopping is increasingly mobile shopping, and that mobile performance is therefore key. As you can see here, the online consumer only shops on a computer is in a minority, and their ranks are shrinking fast. Already 2/3 of consumers who shop online use a smartphone or a tablet at least part of the time, and 1 in 6 only shops on a mobile device, according to ComScore. One of the big reasons more consumers are shopping via mobile devices is the cellular connections we all use are improving rapidly. As you can see, 4G connections were relatively rare in 2010. Only 1% of us had that kind of fast mobile connection. But by last year, it was up to 38%, and 2G was down to 15%. So consumers are expecting fast response from mobile sites and apps as well. And consumers are noticing. In an annual holiday shopping survey, Accenture has been asking consumers why they would shop on a mobile phone or tablet. And while only 9% responded in 2013 because the technology is improving, that jumped to 21% in 2014. Now, mobile technology is improving in a lot of ways. The screens are getting bigger, the devices are getting slicker, retailer apps and mobile sites are getting better. But the bottom line is that consumer expectations for a great shopping experience on mobile are increasing, and that is a big part of the context for this discussion today. So let's move on to our speakers. Again, they will be Nikki Baird, Managing Partner of Retail Systems Research, and Phil Hotchmuth, Head of Market Intelligence at Dyn. And again, after they speak, we'll take your questions, and you can ask questions at any time. And again, you will all get an email next day or two with access to today's slides. With that, I'll turn the mic over to Nikki Baird of Retail Systems Research.
Thanks, Don. Yep, so today I'm going to really provide sort of the context, if you will, around the digital customer experience and kind of bring to life the things that Don was talking about, some of the challenges that retailers are facing from the retailer perspective. So there we go. Whoops, go back one. So my hypothesis basically is that the demand for a high-quality digital customer experience is increasing. That's sort of the consumer side of the equation. On the retailer side, though, there's definitely a recognition of this demand, and retailers are feeling the pressure to respond to it. The challenge they have is that the technologies that support that digital customer experience are actually old. It's kind of weird to think about that in the context of e-commerce, but honestly, some of the early leaders in e-commerce, the first e-commerce sites, are kind of coming up on 20 years old now, and that's sort of running neck and neck in terms of age of some point-of-sale systems out there, which are truly old, but they're also getting more complex. And as you add complexity, especially if you're trying to do it on an older technological foundation, you're really sort of doubling down on the complexity that you have in place. At the same time, we're finding that retailers are expecting these technologies that they have in place and that they're investing in to deliver more complicated customer experiences, and they expect them to deliver those experiences across more channels. So facetiously a little bit, it is sort of a recipe for disaster, right? You've got these rising expectations, both from consumers and from retailers, but when retailers are turning to their systems that are in place to enable these things, they're finding that some of the decisions that they made, not really that long ago, but still long in the terms of technology investments, right? They're not necessarily designed to meet the needs that they're finding that they have to meet to really engage with consumers in the digital space. So let me give you some data to go with this, but I do want to contrast. So I'm going to provide for you the retailer perspective to this story, and then Phil's going to give you the consumer side of the equation. And frankly, I think that these are the most powerful things because retailers have certain ideas and expectations about what consumers want from them, but it's always really interesting to kind of do that gut check and ask consumers and see what they really say, because a lot of times it's a gap between what retailers think they need to do versus what consumers are saying, or sometimes it helps retailers understand the severity of the challenge that they're facing. So I gave you my hypothesis. The demand for experiences is increasing. The technology is older. The retailers are expecting to do more with it. So along the first lines of that, from the retailer perspective, they certainly are expecting more sales to come from their digital channels in the future. And Don kind of illustrated that with some of the year-over-year growth in e-commerce versus stores. But I think that you can really define e-commerce very loosely, and we sort of look at e-commerce as one channel, but honestly more and more retailers are expecting their e-commerce platforms to support all kinds of digital channels. And so as they add digital channels, then that adds avenues for sales growth. So it's not just that they expect that their e-commerce site is going to grow like gangbusters forever and ever. It's that they are adding more touch points in the digital realm, and those touch points are funneling that traffic into the e-commerce platform in one way or another, and so it will be expected to contribute more to both the top and the bottom line of the business. I think it's really interesting. So the 2013, we obviously asked that question in 2013, and 2014 was just at the end of last year. But in 2014, we asked retailers to indicate how much they thought their business would be coming from digital channels in 3 years from now, so 2017. And you can see that they actually expect quite a bit. We kind of have a broad swath in there of that 25 to 74%, but they're effectively expecting to double the percentage of retailers who are going to be in that category in 3 years. So part of the way that retailers plan to get there is also by expanding what they expect from digital channels. And I think one of the most interesting things that we're seeing is this real perspective on e-commerce is not just about commerce, it's about engagement. So one of the things that we do when we survey retailers is we look at them by performance. And performance is really just how Wall Street measures it. It's, are you succeeding or exceeding Wall Street's expectations in terms of year-over-year sales growth? And if you're doing that, you're a retail winner, and if you're not, you're a laggard. Sometimes we'll call out average performers as well. So these retail winners are high-performing sales retailers, and they very often have very different perspectives on what their opportunities are, as well as what their challenges are and what they need to do in order to meet those challenges. And in this case with e-commerce, it's actually there's no surprises there. Retail winners are definitely take a different view of the opportunities that they see in how e-commerce will serve their business. So their challenge today is really much more about getting consumers to engage with them online in the hopes that they can eventually turn that engagement into commerce. but they really see, sort of the biggest opportunity there, whereas their peers are a little bit more concerned with things that are sort of more commerce-oriented, understanding, coping with uncertain consumer demand, and maintaining those really impressive growth rates over time, and increasingly making sure that growth is not coming at too high of a price. So I think what's interesting about sort of the technology space around e-commerce is that we saw sort of this stampede to implement a bunch of stuff really fast. The consumer was changing, the way that she was shopping was changing so fast that there were a lot of investments, and plus e-commerce was growing so fast. The e-commerce teams were sort of awash in money. It wasn't about even ROI or capital constraints like you often find with investments for stores. It really was, I just don't have enough people to take on all of the opportunities that are available to me. And so we found this year that retailers really express themselves in something of an unusual situation. So we often ask about, whether they find a technology to be very valuable to them, and then compare that to what percentage of the respondents have actually implemented that technology. And this year, it's just very odd. We rarely find, only with what I would characterize as sort of infrastructure technologies, do we typically find where they have actually implemented it at a greater rate than they say that they value it. But it was sort of across the board this year in terms of e-commerce capabilities that they said, yeah, we have it, but we're not sure the value that we're getting out of it. And I think that it really is a reflection of, the consumer has been changing so fast, and retailers have to do everything that they can to keep up. It's easier to make those changes on the e-commerce side than it is on the store side of the business. And so, that sort of is reflected here. But it also means that there wasn't necessarily a lot of thought into how they were going to get value out of these things, or how some of these things might work together or might not work well together. And then, even worse, a lot of these capabilities, as I said, have been implemented on a homegrown platform, and these things are much more difficult to change and much more expensive to change, and they tend to be a lot more inflexible than modern e-commerce platforms. But as soon as you start throwing on new capabilities, and we see interest from retailers in terms of things like online branded communities or natural language analytics of reviews, for example, and being able to present the results of those analytics to customers themselves, more demands for dynamically organized content. All of these things put pressure on the systems that are supposed to support and enable them. And when you're doing that on an old system, it gets a little scary. And then, even worse, we're just painting a wonderful picture here. There's what is the expectation for what this e-commerce platform will ultimately do? And retailers increasingly are expecting it to do a lot more than e-commerce. This is really looking at e-commerce far beyond the desktop experience. And as Don talked about, mobile is increasingly becoming important to how consumers shop. And mobile really is just a piece of the pie, as you can see in some of the choices here in terms of where retailers think their e-commerce platform will ultimately support for them. But let's focus on mobile for just a second, because I think everybody's aware of the importance of it. Retailers have a lot of expectations just for each of these individual channels. So, even beyond sort of thinking about e-commerce in general, mobile right now is also kind of enduring its own really interesting, I don't want to call it crisis moment, but maybe inflection point, where the initial investments that retailers have made in their mobile capabilities, they're kind of reevaluating and saying, well, this was all great capability, but we're not really as focused on commerce in the mobile sphere as we are on engagement, and really trying to make connections between the digital realm and maybe the physical realm as the consumers in the store. So even though retailers are looking at things like their e-commerce platform to support their mobile strategy, the things that they want to do with their mobile strategy often are unique to that channel itself. And so as you are trying to support more unique capabilities within each individual channel, you're just building way more complexity on top of something that already is complex and has a lot of capability built into it, often from multiple supporting vendors. So the analogy that I like to make, and I came out of stores, so I definitely can appreciate this analogy very well. When a store is hurting, right, when it doesn't look good, it's really obvious. All you have to do is walk the floor, and you see exactly what your customers see. And if it looks bad, it's pretty obvious right away that it's bad and that something needs to be done to fix it. When your website is not doing well, is not performing as you expect it to, oftentimes that's very, very invisible to you. And so I have this example. It's a screenshot that I took from the Home Shopping Network. Sorry to pick on you. But it's actually the search result that is returned if you search for gift cards on the Home Shopping Network mobile site. Now, if you search for gift cards on hsn.com on the desktop experience, it returns to you the gift cards that HSN sells. So if you were looking to give a gift to someone to use at the Home Shopping Network, you would find that on their full site experience. But this evaluation around gift cards I made last summer. And I went and checked it again in preparation for this webinar, and they still hadn't fixed it. And so now that's officially going on 6 months that they have not noticed that if a customer is on their mobile site and they're looking for a gift card, that it appears as if HSN doesn't even offer gift cards, when that is absolutely not the case. So that's just one example to kind of bring to life kind of the hypothesis that I wanted to lay out for you today, which is there is definitely, retailers are sensing more demand for a high-quality digital customer experience, and really not just focus on commerce, but on engagement as well, which actually is a far more complex activity than just commerce. And commerce is complex enough. But the technologies that support that digital customer experience are old, and they're complex, and not necessarily as refreshed or as modern as retailers would like them to be, especially given some of the complexities of what they're trying to add to those experiences. So with that, I will hand it over to Phil.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm Phil Hotchmuth. I'm Head of Market Intelligence at Dyn. And before we get into my section, which will kind of be a counterpart to Nikki's view of what's going on in retail, we're going to do a little bit more data collection. I'm going to do a quick poll. So we want to ask everyone in the audience, what are your IT investment plans around mobile e-commerce, since mobile is such a hot topic these days? Your plans this year to increase mobile website optimization, creating an app, that sort of thing. Do you plan to greatly increase, slightly increase, investment will be about the same, or do you plan to decrease investment, or don't know? So we'll give everyone in the audience a little time to fill that out. And it'll be interesting to see the results given a lot of the different numbers we've seen here on mobile adoption and some of the things I have in my section. It'll be an interesting analysis. So if you want to go ahead and close the poll, I think we probably have gathered enough info there. So like I said, in this section, we're going to talk about what's going on from the consumer perspective. This section will focus on a survey Dyn conducted earlier this year of online consumers worldwide. It was a really big survey, a big data collection undertaking with some fascinating data points, I think. And just a brief overview of the survey, we talked to, or we interviewed over 1,400 consumers across 11 countries, 3 major regions, North America, EMEA, and APAC. And what we were trying to understand is what are consumers expecting and experiencing from an online retail experience? What's holding them back from buying more online and on their mobile devices? And what retailers need to do to turn skeptical consumers into long-standing customers? So first, the good news. It's going to be a big year in online shopping. 60% of the consumers we surveyed said that they plan to shop more online this year than they did last year. And I think what's driving a lot of this from the consumer standpoint is the general familiarity and comfort level with the online shopping experience. People are just more used to putting in credit card numbers into a website these days, buying things online. Cyber Mondays become kind of an institution now, even if it's the only time a year that you buy something online. So everyone's kind of aware of it. And as Nikki pointed out in a lot of her research and data, is that the retailers are really making the experiences much more rich and engaging on their end. So you have much more omni-channel focus. We're trying to reach people across different platforms, simplifying payment. All those things are sort of driving a lot of this. Still, the reality is a lot of visitors who come to your site don't buy. And the reasons behind that are complicated. Some of them are technical. Some of them are just the circumstances of whoever's shopping at that time. Some people are just looking for store information, price comparisons. They can't find what they're looking for. Generally, website performance is not the first thing that will deter someone from shopping online. It's an issue for some, to be sure. I mean, a quarter of shoppers say that they'll leave about half the time if they're not experiencing a good experience in terms of responsiveness. But general, a lot of people don't buy because of just some circumstances around what they're trying to find or what they're doing on the website. So, but for those who find what they're looking for and then don't buy, this is where you get some interesting information, I think, from the data. The top issue that is for a lot of people is security. So when they find something online, they're worried about the security of actually making the final payment. And Nikki mentioned we're 20 years into e-commerce and e-retail now, but still, now more than ever, I think online cybercrime, identity theft is a challenge for a lot of people, and it's as you can see, it's still holding back for a lot of people. I mean, people are nervous about sharing information online. They're a little bit it's a deterrent for a lot of people. So we're keeping an eye on that. Generally, if you found the product from a customer point of view, a little latency won't be much of a deterrent because you've made the investment and time into find what you're looking for. So then you actually go ahead and make the purchase. So website slowness, an issue, but not a front of mind issue there in that sense. However, you'll see in the next few slides, there is a strong correlation between website performance and perceived security that is an issue for many people that will have to be sort of addressed. And what we're talking about here is shoppers who are leery of slow loading sites. So more than half of the online consumers we talked to here said that if a site loads slowly, their trust in that site goes down. So think about all the things that we now know can happen in an online experience. You go into a website, there have been documented issues of malware being posted to legitimate websites that can get downloaded. A less frequent but certainly a real concern is hackers spoofing a common website that you might use and using it to gather information from the customer. So when people kind of experience this funkiness or slowness in a website that they're visiting, a lot of people, for the first thing they think of is something's fishy. I'm out of here. I don't want to get my machine infected. Whether or not your actual e-commerce infrastructure is PCI compliant on the back end, and you do security scans on the front end, and it's tightened up from that standpoint. If there's that initial slowness in terms of first experience, a lot of people are going to think that there's a security issue, which can really deter people from shopping and using your site. And the window is incredibly small, especially for these leery shoppers who don't like that initial experience of having a slow loading website. 3 seconds is really the longest they'll wait according to our data. Over 2/3 of the folks we surveyed said that that's the longest they'll wait. So if you think about it, these are a large portion of the online web population who aren't even coming in the front door of your online store because of slowness, which they may actually be associating with a security problem. So it's an issue not just for the experience of the end user, but just getting them in the front door in the first place. We looked at some information on shopping outside of their own country from the people we surveyed. And some interesting findings here, not much of a deterrent there. Nearly 2/3 of online shoppers we surveyed had bought something outside of their own country in the last 12 months. So that indicates, again, a little bit kind of a comfort zone around if you find a product you want online, there's less of a barrier maybe than there used to be to buying something from another country. And generally, those who are buying from a web shop based in another country, they're finding that the experience is good. So if you've actually made the purchase and you've trusted the site, the experience is good enough to come back. So I think a key takeaway from there is that online stores that can focus on that initial first impression of high performance and responsiveness, and then gain the trust from a security and reliability standpoint of a customer, they can really broaden their addressable market in terms of getting customers in their online store that they may never even be able to see in the physical world. So something to think about in terms of the availability of new markets and new shoppers. We talked about mobile, and some of the mobile data we saw is pretty interesting in that we think of mobile smartphones and devices as being pervasive, and they really are. And everyone's kind of gearing up for a wave of mobile shopping adoption, but the data shows we're not really quite there yet. So, I mean, over 60% of the folks we surveyed said they never buy on a mobile device. A little bit surprising. And only 10% of those people said that they frequently shop on a mobile device. So, a little bit less uptake in the mobile realm than you'd probably anticipate. And just across the board, in-store is still a primary way most people buy things these days. But as you can see at the bottom, online, the traditional online experience, as opposed to mobile shopping on a PC, over half of people are buying are shopping online in that sense, at least a quarter of the time. So, that speaks to kind of the increase we're seeing in mobile in terms of overall e-commerce adoption. Just mobile lagging a little bit behind where we might expect it to be right now. Some mobile shopping trends for 2015. We asked, do you plan to make more purchases this year than you did last year on your mobile device? And good news is that more than a third said yes, they do plan to. However, more than that, almost 40% said they don't plan to buy more online on their mobile this year than they did last year. So that leaves an interesting group of maybes who are kind of up for grabs here, that this will kind of be the make or break year for them to decide if buying on their phone or tablet is really something they'll be comfortable with. And a lot of this is going to come down to speed and the trust of the site. And as you can see from some of the issues that hold people back from buying on mobile, speed is a top issue. It's not as fast and easy as shopping from my computer. Now, to some extent, that can be an issue with the website's performance. It could be an issue with how optimized is the mobile website for the form factor of the small screen. If it's easy to obviously, navigation it ties into that, which is something a lot of people cited. Security, we talked about that earlier. That's also another issue for many people on the mobile device. And the comfort level, just not that comfortable with it. That could go across a lot of different areas. I mean, they're not comfortable from a security standpoint, not comfortable with it from a usability standpoint, but in the end, it kind of comes down to trust and speed as being the key ingredients, as Nikki said earlier, of kind of how do you provide a good mobile shopping experience for folks. A little bit deeper dive into some of the data we had on the mobile experience. Expectations are very high for mobile, as Don and Nikki both said earlier. Shoppers overwhelmingly expect the same level of in-store and traditional shopping as they do on their mobile, it's a lot to ask. I mean, but granted, think about how much you pay in your wireless bill and how much the phone costs. You expect a lot out of it, so you could kind of see that reasoning to some extent. And the reality is that actual experiences on the mobile devices aren't measuring up. Only 4% of people say that the mobile experience outranks the others in terms of usability and ease of use. So to some extent, that's really kind of fallen behind the other areas. Interestingly here, though, online, as you can see, is pretty much, and we saw in the other earlier data, pretty much neck and neck with in-store in terms of a good experience. So people are perceiving the online experience in general as really good, but it's that mobile gap that I think people are going to have to start to cross. And the last data point here I thought was particularly interesting regarding how people connect to mobile websites for shopping and e-commerce. And we talked about this earlier. You know, cellular networks have always been kind of the blame of a mobile experience. You know, dead spots and lack of bandwidth and things like that. Granted, that is going away, but according to our data, most people are connecting to these websites for e-commerce over the same type of network connectivity that they would be for their traditional online experience, Wi-Fi. So it's not that mobile network latency issue that's being introduced here. So online retailers and particularly IT leadership, they're going to have to focus more on that, either the back-end infrastructure, the web infrastructure itself, or the experience as it is from a app standpoint or mobile content presentation standpoint. Those are probably where a lot of the issues are lying. So kind of getting to the money question here, what do online retailers and e-commerce companies need to do to improve the online shopping experience? And a lot of this ties back to some of the things we discussed earlier, but giving the same quality of experience whether they're shopping online or on the phone, that sort of omni-channel approach where you know, it's the same type of brand, same availability of products, same experience as you would have on mobile and on the phone. That's what people are really looking for. To sort of have that be one experience as opposed to being two drastically different experiences, which some people apparently see as being the issue right now. You know, everybody wants to find things faster, so you know, increased availability of search and product cataloging and things like that is going to be critical. Improve the overall site appearance of the user experience. Again, this kind of ties to that omni-channel approach, meaning you need to sort of level how the site is perceived and interacted with across the different channels. And then a more personalized experience. People are really looking for that, and that's what, you know, really the name of the game is for a lot of retail these days, making it as much as a one-to-one experience as they can, as opposed to sort of a one-to-many, which was how the, you know, traditional e-commerce and retail was done. But I think all this really boils down to speed and personalization. Speed is the key, and make it mine. These are kind of the two trends we're sort of taking away from these data as it is from the consumer point of view. So I want to talk a little bit now about some of the things that Dyn does from a solution standpoint that addresses some of the issues brought up by the consumers and their perceptions of the e-commerce experience. So in terms of speed, what Dyn offers and our solutions are in terms of managed DNS and traffic director solutions. What we can do is we offer solutions that route customers' traffic to the most available and closest websites, content, and content delivery networks that are serving up the e-commerce experience for end users. The managed DNS provides query resolution and traffic optimization that can really cut into that latency time that's, as we saw earlier, was really critical in making in the decision making as to whether the consumer will even stick around to shop, whether they trust the site or feel that it's, you know, good enough for them to shop at. This is a critical point that really we can address with our ability to route traffic optimally and fast that way. You know, this leads to a fast and responsive web shopping experience, and you know, a lot of customers that we have in the retail space, that one of them we'll talk about in a minute, is really benefiting from this type of solution. The other area that we can do, that we address with some of our solutions, is the make it mine, the personalization approach. And as a feature of our traffic management and DNS products, we can actually do geolocation of customers in terms of their physical location to optimally route their traffic to websites and content located in the country that's closest to them, or in the region where they can most easily access it with the least amount of latency and the best performance. And also to that end, Dyn solutions around email delivery, where we provide email delivery for e-commerce and all types of customers, also is another make it mine type of proposition, where nowadays, even online and even so much in the store, the paper receipt is giving way to the electronic receipt, which is in most cases an email. If you've ever visited an Apple store, you've experienced this, and some of the other retailers. But getting that email delivered often is the final, really, insurance point of that the transaction went through and it worked. Okay, did they actually take my money? Did this website complete the transaction? Yes, I got an email from them. Dine's email delivery solutions power that, along with the key communications that happen between the customer who opts in and wants ongoing information and content from a retailer, whether it's coupons or promotions or sales news. We ensure that those emails get delivered into the inbox and not the spam box. And like I said, I just want to talk real quick about one of a good customer of Dine's in the retail space, the e-commerce space, Etsy, the purveyor or the sort of now almost the de facto site for custom craft, homemade goods online. Just this company's seen phenomenal growth over the last several years, 30+ million members, 60+ million unique visitors, and almost $1 billion in revenue. And as they saw their growth really skyrocketing and the trajectory of user base growing at that rate, they ran into that issue of latency and internet performance in that DNS resolutions were not being fast enough. Their customers were experiencing latency and dissatisfaction with their product. Even though Etsy itself was born on the internet and is a very technological focused company, this sort of basic nut and bolt issue of the internet was having some problems for them. So what they did is they partnered with us, with Dine, and using our Dine Managed DNS solutions, we were able to really decrease the latency that their customers saw. Our global Anycast network allows Etsy customers anywhere to really have that rich internet experience. But I think primarily, most importantly, is that the outsourcing or the use of cloud DNS from Etsy allows their tech teams to focus on a lot of the other technological issues that they need to do to make their e-commerce experience more rich, more engaging, whether it's making a killer app or optimizing search or doing all the things that all the other things beyond just optimization and fast response time that you have to have from an e-commerce retail standpoint. So everyone, I want to say thank you for watching and listening. Everyone who's registered for this webinar will receive an email where you can download the full report from our survey, and it's got a lot more data, a much deeper dive into some of the stats, especially on a regional and country level. That's really interesting that you'll want to dig into there. So with that, I think we're going to check out our poll, see what the results are. And it looks like we're all kind of in the same sync here. A lot of folks here, 38%, nearly 40% saying they will greatly increase investment in mobile optimization from last year. Another quarter of folks saying they will slightly increase. Really nobody plans to decrease, which is a good sign, and I think validates a lot of kind of what we're thinking about and what we're seeing from our end as Dine, and what Nikki's seeing and what Don is also seeing in his sphere. So thanks for everyone for responding to the poll. And I think we'll now hand it over to Don for the Q&A.
Okay. Well, thank you, Phil, and thanks, Nikki. Plenty of good stuff, and certainly seems to be a clear trend towards consumers and retailers recognizing that mobile opens up a lot of new opportunities for us, both to shop and to sell. We're now moved to our question period. Before we do, I just want to remind everyone that you all get an email with information about how to access today's slides, as well as the Dine report that Phil mentioned. We do have some questions in the queue, but there's still time to add yours. So let's get to the questions. First one, for Nikki, understanding that over 3 seconds is problematic, what is the current industry benchmark for page load time?
Honestly, I would like to hear what Phil thinks about that, because I bet he's got a lot more data on that than I do.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen, I mean, obviously from our consumer survey, we're seeing, that 3-second kind of benchmark is what consumers are expecting. We've seen some data from some large retailers that suggest as much as 5 seconds can be the norm, especially if you're talking about region-to-region connectivity. And some data I've actually seen from a vendor that I won't actually name, but it was interesting in that mobile is where you're seeing a lot of lag time. In that mobile, in terms of mobile latency, can be up to 10 seconds in some circumstances, particularly if that end user is connecting via that cellular network. That could be that's often a source of latency. But yeah, I mean, it can be all over the place, but those are some of the stats that we've seen.
Just to follow up on that, Phil, when you talk about the load time, are you talking about the time for the page to fully load, or for the time for it to, for at least the part that that I as a consumer would see, and there might be other things loading in the background? So what exactly are you measuring there?
We're typically looking at full load time. I mean, that's when the end user can really start to experience, everything that a site can offer. And it's interesting now because the way that a lot of websites in general, but a lot of e-commerce sites are built now, is that they're not just built from one source. Often there's many DNS calls that have to happen to sort of assemble the page like a puzzle piece, in that you might have some rich media hosted on a content delivery network that's in another region. You might have data from another storage platform, maybe in the Amazon and the S3 platform in another area. You may have a video feed from a video provider. All of these things kind of have to come together very quickly to be the storefront. You don't just walk into a store that's sort of half built. So that's kind of the issue with that, is full load time is really what people are looking for, and that's kind of the benchmark, I think.
Okay, next question. This is for Phil. What is the difference between Dine's active failsafe versus geolocation sync at the data center?
Well, the failsafe is more of a detection of the health of the endpoint. So if you're trying to reach a website or a server and it goes down, that solution will actually fail it over to a backup solution or server. So it's really more of a backup, as it says in the title, sort of a fail-safe type of solution. The geolocation is really more about optimization of the traffic from the location of the end user to the destination. And so we mentioned that earlier in that sort of make it mine approach that retailers can take, is if you can locate where the person is coming from an IP address standpoint and a regional standpoint, geolocation can actually connect them to the resources that are closest to them, which will cut into that latency, and then also offer the opportunity to make a more customized type of experience.
Okay, thanks. Here's a question for Nikki. You mentioned buyers' concerns about security, but not retailers' concerns. What percentage of online purchases are fraudulent? And this person says that about 15% of his online sales are fraudulent, particularly through PayPal, and 15% sounds pretty high to me. What do you think, Nikki?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that sounds pretty high. We actually have a survey that's in flight right now that we'll publish in April that gets to exactly this topic. It focuses on payments in general and then the security around that payments. I think one takeaway that's going to be really important for every retailer is that as EMV in the U.S. gets deployed, the pressure on online frauds will increase tremendously. They saw it in Canada when they rolled out EMV there. They saw it in Europe when they rolled out EMV there. As soon as you eliminate the possibility of in-store fraud, which EMV goes a long way towards eliminating, doesn't do all of it, but a lot of it, all of those fraudsters focus their attention to online. So if you're experiencing difficult fraud rates now, now is the time to make the investments in whatever you need to in order to protect yourself, because there's an avalanche of fraud that is coming in your direction at the end of this year.
Can you just explain briefly what EMV is?
Yeah, it's the global payment standards. It's Europay, MasterCard, and Visa is what it stands for, and it's really the chip and PIN. So some of you may already be getting cards in the mail from your bank, your credit card issuers that have the chip in them. The U.S. is, the issuers are trying to screw this up as much as they possibly can by not issuing PINs with all of the credit cards. It's going to be chip and signature as the initial rollout in the U.S. And there's a whole host of topics and discussions just around that alone. But what it means is it's harder for thieves to steal your credit card number and actually produce a duplicate card. So in-store fraud rates tend to go down a lot, but online it's card not present, and that card not present still will remain card not present. So it sort of becomes really the big leaky hole in eliminating fraud is these card not present transactions. And as I said, as it gets locked down in store, it'll all shift to online.
Okay, another question, payment-related question for you, Nikki. When you talk about non-traditional payment methods, do you mean things like PayPal as opposed to credit card?
Yeah, and Bitcoin and digital wallets, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that card issuers and innovators in the industry are trying to manage the transfer of value. Sometimes that could even be redeeming gift cards or redeeming sort of non-cash like loyalty points. We tend to put a broad brush on it in our e-commerce survey, but again, we'll actually dive into that a lot more in detail in the results that come out in April on payments.
Okay, question for you, Phil. What is the difference between a VPS hosting versus cloud-based hosting in regard to latency response time?
VPS hosting versus cloud-based hosting. So I think what you're talking about there is a virtualized websites hosted on top of a sort of virtualized platform versus cloud. I mean, it depends on, I think, a lot of factors. I mean, one factor in particular that we encounter that we help a lot of customers with is if in the hosting scenario the DNS is managed by the hosting provider or by an external third party or by the customer themselves. And one thing we can address certainly, and we have a lot of experience in, is helping people with that outsourcing or moving of the DNS component to the cloud. Relying on the hosting provider's DNS solution is often sort of a starting point where a lot of our customers, particularly in retail and customers who are in very web-centric markets, that's where they really run into kind of the first place of issue of performance. Is they've put their servers up in a hosting rack environment, but the DNS resolution is still done by that provider. So the issue is the DNS is only as good as that hosting provider and the availability of that hosting provider. So that's where they can kind of run into issues, especially if they're trying to reach customers on a global scale. The fact that we have over 18 points of presence worldwide with our DNS infrastructure makes that just go beyond way the scope of any one hosting provider, and really allows us to resolve queries around the world and direct traffic optimally that way.
And related to that, do you find that clients that host their own websites have less latency, or do they encounter other problems as opposed to those who use outsourced providers?
I mean, it depends on the nature of the customer. From the standpoint of a high volume transaction website that's hosting its own DNS, some very large organizations do that. We found that some of the largest customers in e-commerce don't want to have the onus put on them for resolving all those queries. They don't want to have to worry about the scale of that infrastructure. They're more interested in focusing on the enhancements of the site itself. So worrying about the DNS is something that people will often, in our experience, when they're interested in really looking for ways to increased performance, but lower just sort of care and feeding of that type of solution, they'll push it out into the cloud to a provider like us, where that's all that Dyn does is manage DNS and optimize it. And well, it's not all we do, but from that standpoint, we're in an optimal position to do that. So that's where a lot of customers can see success there.
Okay, getting back to the question of consumer trust in websites, what are some of the ways that a retailer or brand can increase customer trust in their website? Phil, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, trust in the website, well, as we saw in the data, it definitely starts with that first experience. The faster the site will load, the more, I guess, the perception that the site is clean, that there's not some funkiness going on in the background. There's a whole industry of ways to sort of impart trust on the website and assure customers that that the site is on the up and up. There's trust seals that security providers can provide to indicate to the user that the site has been scanned for malware or that it meets certain security criteria. On the back end, things like PCI compliance and things like that. There's site seals like the Better Business Bureau site that means that the company is an actual business that's been registered somewhere that can assure people of a quality experience. And from that standpoint, there's also just ways that end users can just assure that the site they're visiting is actually where they should be, looking in the browser. Sometimes a lot of the phishing scams and malicious, kind of man-in-the-middle approaches that people take are, sending an email to go to a website, hit the link, you think you're going to, myfavoritestore.com or whatever, you're actually going to the hacker's website, which might be some bizarre, garbled URL that if you don't look up in the URL bar, you may not even notice that you're there. But the site was built and made to look like the website of a familiar company. So that's an issue that a lot of people can sort of take precautions of, and also making sure that the transaction that they're having is encrypted with SSL. If there's a warning that the site has an expired SSL certificate, or if they're not seeing the indication in the address bar on their browser that the site is encrypted, that's another thing that people can do to kind of address that.
Okay, another question for you, Phil. Do you have any data on the level of consumer trust in consumer reviews on websites?
I don't. I don't have any of that data. We didn't really kind of get into that into this study.
Okay. Next question for Nikki. We're talking about alternative payments. What's your take on Apple Pay?
Oh gosh, personally, I like it. I like being able to use it as a consumer. But I find that, one, that I think Apple and the retailers who are participating in Apple Pay need to do more to make consumers aware that they can use it in their stores, whether that's, even as stupidly simple as an Apple Pay logo on the card reading device, just to sort of refresh the consumer's memory that, hey, oh yeah, this store does take it. I understand some of the challenges on the back end in terms of the retailer maybe losing touch with who that customer is. I actually was shocked. I thought with PCI that, the way I interpreted PCI was that you, as a retailer, if you were using credit card numbers to track your customers as a customer identifier, that you weren't really going to be able to do that anymore. And I have since learned that that's not technically true. It just means that you better be doing everything you possibly can to protect that credit card number if you want to continue to use it as an identifier. And there are retailers out there that are actually still doing that. And one of the things that Apple Pay does is, because it's a one-time card number, it's actually one of the most secure ways that you can pay as a consumer today. But it means that the retailer loses track of the credit card number that you use to pay. They don't have visibility into that anymore. Frankly, I think that's a bad practice anyway, and they shouldn't be doing it. But if you are doing it that way, then you should be prepared that if you accept Apple Pay, you are going to lose that visibility.
Hey, Nick, isn't a lot of that going on with the trend in like tokenization as well? Is that something you're seeing at all? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. It's absolutely related to that. I think most retailers, that I guess it's fair to say the average retailer's response to some of the requirements about PCI, and to your point about hackers and trust and all of that, is to not hold the data at all. So if they use tokenization and you know, where it's encrypted and they get out of the way and never hold it to begin with, you know, that's the easiest way to wipe your hands of all of these requirements. So like I said, I'm amazed to find that there are still retailers out there that use credit card numbers as customer identifiers. I think you're crazy if you do that.
Yeah.
Okay, a question for you, Phil, about the survey. What were some of the regional differences or major differences in responses from particular countries compared to worldwide respondents?
Yeah, there were quite a few interesting differences there. One of the issues around trust and the willingness to sort of have a slow experience and have it affect your trust, you know, we said over half of people worldwide saw that as a deterrent. But if you went into APAC, particularly Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, you really saw that number increase up to like 70%, 75%. So a lot more, I guess, maybe distrust of a slow experience in that region than maybe the worldwide average. Also, some just generally, you know, a trend that might not, you know, be too surprising, but folks outside of North America generally bought more products from outside their country than just the North America cohort. So, you know, that makes some sense in that many retailers are North American based, or online retailers are North American based. But that was another kind of interesting difference, is that those international, you know, from an American standpoint, those international consumers were much more willing to cross the borders and buy something from another country.
Okay. Question for Nikki. Are you noticing big e-commerce providers updating their software?
Yeah, you know, so there's two parts to that one, I think. One, I think it's fair to say that the major e-commerce platforms have become very big and complex, and by that I'll single out it's ATG and Webster Commerce, and even to a lesser degree Demandware, right? Those are sort of the big three that are out there. Part of the alarm bell that is ringing for me is, you know, I've seen the rise of these third parties that are not just implementers, but they're actually providing a layer of software on top of these solutions. So companies like Acquia or Crossview, where they're actually providing functionality, and the way they pitch it is they're hiding some of the complexity of these platforms and making it easier for end users to, you know, update pages and you know, combine content and commerce and all those kinds of things. And so that's a little scary to me. I think the other thing to note about the e-commerce ecosystem is that we're starting to see companies that are coming to market with whole new, you know, designed from scratch kind of platforms. And Mozu is a player that comes to mind there, where they're sort of saying, hey, look, the technology that's available today has come so far that it's better to start from scratch than it is to try to evolve what you've already invested in. And, you know, and here we are. We have something that starts from scratch. I mean, I haven't seen that before in e-commerce before the last couple of years, whereas that's sort of a standard play. You see that in point of sale. You see that even in merchandising, where, you know, it's like, oh, what you've got is so old and complex, but you need something new and simple and built on modern technology. So it's sort of a maturity point for e-commerce in general that we're seeing these kinds of things happening in the market. And I do think that, you know, the big e-commerce players, it's definitely on them to make sure that their systems stay modern and sleek and flexible more than anything else probably.
Okay, one quick last question for you, Phil. What major retailers besides Etsy are using your DNS or managed DNS or traffic management solutions?
Well, we won't talk about specific customers. I mean, Etsy's one that we like to talk about publicly, but I will say the trends in general are that a large growing population of the top e-tail customers are using managed DNS solutions. I mean, it's public information. If a website is using a DNS solution, you can use tools to figure that out. But just from our own research, among the top 500 e-commerce websites as ranked by Alexa, more than a third now are using a managed DNS solution. And we've seen that grow pretty fast over the last several quarters. Just, more and more, and this is really up from, less than 25% just maybe a couple of years ago. So there's just becoming more of awareness around going outsourced, going cloud with DNS, and a lot of it plays to exactly what Nikki was just talking about. The complexity of those e-commerce systems on the back end are getting to the point where you have so many externalized systems that are now becoming critical components in the e-commerce platform. They all have, and all of that is managed by domain names and DNS resolution. So to be able to put that puzzle together as quickly as possible for the end user with all these different components, a lot of the e-commerce companies who are on that cutting edge and really, using a lot of different SaaS services to deliver the experience, they're finding that to do that efficiently, you really have to look outside to a cloud solution for DNS and traffic management.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Thank you, Nikki Baer from RSR and Phil Hotchmuth from Dyn, and thank you all for attending. Remember, you all get an email with access to the slides and to the Dyn report. So thanks again. Have a great day.